Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
This week on the Core Women Podcast, I'm thrilled to welcome Rachel Kaplan, who is a licensed marriage family therapist, TEDx speaker, and author of Feel, Heal, and Let That Shit Go, Your Guide to Emotional Resilience and Lasting Love. Rachel's book is a practical, relatable guide to building emotional resilience and cultivating lasting self-love by teaching readers how to process their emotional shit, release it, and fully embrace the life they're living. Tune in as we discuss her journey, the healing power of feeling your feelings, and the steps to create a more fulfilling, emotional-free life. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm so excited to be here with you. Before we really get into your professional journey, if you could describe your life to this point in one word, what would that word be and why?
Well, I love that you're asking for one. That really makes me choose.
Yes, one.
I'm going to go with colorful. I happen to be obsessed with rainbows and color and patterns, and I call it power clashing, like bringing things together that you wouldn't always expect. And I love doing that with design, but also with, for instance, depth and humor.
Yeah.
My work is all about approaching, and my life journey has been teaching me how to and forcing me to approach the deepest, most painful aspect of being a human. And yet the approach I do it with has a ton of levity and humor and practicality. So it's like these like unexpected dynamics coming together in a really like artful way. And yeah.
I love
Did I
that.
cheat?
Yeah, you can absolutely cheat. This is all about you, and I'm excited to hear more about you. And I love that dichotomy between that seriousness, but that levity that you bring
Yeah.
into it. So, I'm all about that. I think that having fun while you're doing what you're passionate about is absolutely right on point. So
What's
let's
the
have
point of
fun.
healing if we don't enjoy? Like, what is the point of
Right.
healing?
And doing everything that you do is as much as you can anyway. I know there's tough things in life, but there also can be like a glimmer of hope in all those tough things as well. And
Absolutely.
that
Yeah,
laughter, that smile, that whatever it is that brings you joy internally makes such a difference. So let's talk
absolutely.
about your journey and your draw to being a therapist, how this practice of letting emotional shit go evolved for you.
Yeah. Well, it began, I had the regular kind of human wounding that we all have just from being raised by humans, attachment stuff and just like bio, family of origin stuff. But my first love, my first attachment was this young boy I became obsessed with at age 12, and he took his life at age 14. We were both almost 15. It was a terrible, convoluted tragedy where he kind of pulled me into a web of lies to say goodbye, but essentially trapped me, like knowing that he kind of wanted to kill himself, not feeling free to stop him. So just before I turned 15, I was absolutely annihilated inside, tried to actually stop him from taking his life by promising him that I would also. He still did it. He broke an agreement. And, I spent a couple years wanting to die, totally moving into my thoughts only, trying to avoid this absolutely intolerable pain. And by around age 16, actually, when I had accidentally caught feelings for someone else, I started to understand the depth of the hollowness I had created inside in effort to escape this pain, and really saw clearly that I wouldn't be able to build a life over this hole. And so I got into therapy, and that began a very slow journey of healing. I mean, I'd say that I had the first major layer of healing by age 18, and I was young and deluded, so I thought I was much further along. And it was a beautiful moment. I mean, it was a real return of soul in a way. And I became very interested in Eastern religions and spirituality. And probably by 18, I knew that my life path was to walk with people on this healing journey. And I was in grad school to be a therapist by 24. What's fascinating about the body of work that's in the book, that's in my podcast, that's in everything I'm doing now, is that I would say it took me until age 37 to actually reach a place where I genuinely felt this robust baseline of resilience and self-love. And I could tell you stories, but we only have 25 minutes, so I won't. But what I realized after this long journey, and I could tell you if you're curious about some of the key points, was that most of us, I mean, I had been a professional, successful psychotherapist for a decade at that point in my life. Most people are hobbling around at, I'd say, about like 60, 70% of self-love or well-being. Kind of like they're, even people in therapy, even professionals. I think it's the general population who might have a lot of knowledge of their early wounding and stories, beautiful narratives about why they are the way they are. I think most people were still kind of haunted, myself included, by this core wound of, am I good enough? Am I lovable? Am I acceptable? And so everything I've done in the last 8 years has really been what made the difference? What were the essential ingredients that made the difference between me hobbling around and me feeling just deep self-resilience, self-love? And how do I kind of break it down in the most understandable, applicable, practical way for people? And that's kind of opened up this relentless focus of sharing this information. I had some really unique outside the box help in my journey. And so I wanted to synthesize it for people so that people's journeys and their healing can be expedited.
That is put so well. You mentioned a lot of things along the way. You yourself took a journey and you had something that was highly impactful early on in your life that left an impression on you, and you had to work through that. How did you, at such a young age, recognize that?
My sister had gone away to college and I would act like she was dead. I had started this relationship with a friend who lived an hour away. And when I didn't see him, I would completely shut down. I just had no sustained baseline to endure distance or loss. And actually, to be honest, I took a mushroom journey as a senior in high school, or maybe junior. And it was terrifying. I was in my house. My sister, came home from college and, I tried this thing. I was absolutely terrified of everything. Literally the statues. We had built this very modern house. There were some art statues, shadows. It was just this baseline of terror,
Right.
which was pretty uncomfortable. It wasn't that much insight in that experience, but in the come down of it, I remember I sat with my sister in our backyard and kind of just spoke to my little, 16-year-old perspective at that point of we're all these planets and we're ultimately orbiting alone and we cross paths briefly, but we're destined to be alone. I just had this massive glimpse into the wounded aftermath of this terrible tragedy. And I was like, I need help. If I don't deal with this, I won't feel okay. So, and I would say first of all, this is pretty amazing. The woman that I started working with as a therapist at that point wrote the foreword to my book. And we lost touch. I mean, we did amazing work together, and I credit her for kind of the beginning of me moving from my brain back into my body and back toward my emotions. What was fascinating is after a long break of contact, I reached out to her right around my 20-year high school reunion. I was going to be in the city she lived in. She didn't get back to me for a year or two. But then when she did, she said, I've been spying on your life through your podcast, which is the Healing Feeling Shit Show. Season 1 of my podcast is really the body of work that is now the book. It's really more of a course than a podcast. But she said, your podcast is mandated listening for all of my patients.
Oh, wow.
We've reconnected. I just gave a TEDx talk in October. She came out for it. And she actually said that when she met me, she had all these kind of intuitive voices saying this young girl is going to help heal the world, which I was like, what? But it's really been a beautiful journey. And, I think the piece around starting to feel, I mean, so many of us are trying to escape our emotional pain by intellectualizing and staying in our thoughts. And the sad reality is that our minds and our thoughts are like labyrinths. There's no end. Maybe you'll get some relief because you feel like you solved something, but it's literally endless and infinite. Whereas our bodies have much more finite processes. You can only sleep so long, you can only eat so much, you only pee so long, etc. Right? And so when we bring things into the body, there's a much more kind of limited but complete arc that can happen where you can have a, beginning, middle, end of an experience, and there's more relief. And so when I first, met her, she'd say, "How are you doing?" or "How do you feel about something?" And I'd say, "I'm frustrated and I'm in da da da," and like all these big words. And she was like, "No, you have 4 options." And her words are slightly different than what I teach, but glad, mad, sad, scared. And when you only have these basic, simple words, it's very hard to avoid sensation. It's very hard to avoid emotion. So I slowly started journeying back into feeling and being able to connect to this huge pain I was in. I mean, I was devastated.
Yeah. That's a lot to go through for anybody. And for
Yeah,
being a young woman who is so connected in a relationship, a young relationship, you're figuring out your own emotions. You're figuring out your life, the trajectory of your life. We have all these grand thoughts, and then something like that happens, and it's devastating.
absolutely.
It's really incredible that you were so insightful, even on your microdosing journey of
Yeah,
sorts, that you were able to have that insight.
yeah,
And I don't even know if I'd call it an epiphany, but that moment, that glimpse, that glimmer of, I need some help.
yeah,
And where do I go for this? And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get stuck. They may know, but they don't know the steps. And sometimes it's the most practical things that we get tripped up over because
yeah.
it can be the single step that moves us forward. So let's talk about, in your experience, what are some common misconceptions people have about emotional healing, and how does your approach address them?
Ooh, I love that. Start right with the like rebellious controversy. Let's go. Yeah, let's see how to summarize it. I would say, I think even when someone is like, okay, I want help and I want to get help, the help really ranges. And being a therapist is a great job. And not everyone has had to transform intolerable, nearly deadly pain. And not everyone, maybe that they did have to, but like didn't really learn how to. So I think as an industry in general, there is an over focus on managing symptoms instead of getting to the core of the symptoms. And, like thought regulation, CBT, kind of like these types of approaches can be very helpful, dovetailed with a more core wound or root of the issue type of approach. But I don't think that just modulating your thoughts will actually do anything necessarily about the part that's really been injured. Whereas I think if you learn the tools of how do you drop into your body, your sensations, how do you connect to the part of you, how do you form a relationship with the part of you that doesn't feel lovable, and you can be with that part, welcome that part in a relational way, in a way that right now is most similar in my approach to what is being called parts work, although I'm not IFS trained. They're getting all the credit for parts work. Parts have always been here. I first encountered parts work in Gestalt training as a young therapist. But how do you form a relationship with the part that feels unlovable and care for it and love it in a way where it can come back online, back into experience? Most of us try to repress the parts of us that we fear will make us lose love. Because
Mm.
when we're tiny little babies, we know at a biological level that if we don't have proximity and closeness with these caregivers, usually parents, not always, we'll die. We're little organisms that can't hold our head up, can't feed ourselves. So an unloved, uncared for baby is a dead baby, right? We know that in our biology. And so we, when we're tiny, are willing to do whatever we need to keep our caregivers close and happy. So if our parents start to glass over, get distant, become upset when we're crying, when we're expressing, our unique quirks or needs, or if we don't fit into what they thought a little boy or little girl should be like, we are inclined to cast out the parts of us that feel threatening so that we can keep them close. So by the time people get to a place where they realize, I feel off, I don't feel like I like myself or know myself even, usually the parts that seemed problematic, they've lost access to, because in order to survive, they had to kind of repress or stop expressing these parts. So usually the first step, if you want to feel actually lovable, is you have to find the parts of you that you're so sure aren't lovable and build a relationship with them and bring them in so that you might have the chance of feeling the emotional pain they're in. And then I would say the biggest misconception is that like our thoughts and our stories about why we are how we are make any difference. People have the most elaborate version of what they went through and how it impacted them. And it doesn't necessarily mean shit. Is it okay to swear? I guess you
Yeah,
already did with my
absolutely.
title. It doesn't necessarily change anything. And so, in order to really show up in a different way, there's an actual kind of metabolic process. You know, the closest thing I found to this whole journey, the way of teaching it, is talking about emotional potty training for grown-ups. It's like when we were tiny, one of the things that most of us learned was when you get this sensation in your guts that you have a cramping and need to poop, there's literally only one thing you can go do to not have that feeling. You know, we weren't taught that if you watch TV or if you get enough likes or downloads, you won't be full of that slightly uncomfortable feeling. We know that we had to go to the bathroom and let the poop out, right?
Right.
Emotions are similarly intense clusters of sensations that move through the body that signal something needs to happen, something needs to move. But most of our parents didn't know that. And it was very hard to keep us alive and fed, let alone entertain and allow our emotions. So most of us were plopped in front of TVs or given treats or told that there was nothing to be sad or scared about, right? And so we don't learn the tools of recognizing a signal from the body and allowing it to move through, allowing it to be what it is. If you take the E off the word emotion, what's left is motion. They literally move through us quite quickly when we're out of the way and we let them. And so my book and the main body of work is what I call emotional potty training for grown-ups. It's like, how do you find the parts of you that are hurting? How do you court them back into relationship? And then how do you help them clear out this backlog of unprocessed pain? And I get really into the details of what does working with anger look like? What does working with sadness look like? How do you move fear? How do you recover? How do you use your like thought testing? Let's say I call it reality testing, which I said it is important. You need to dovetail to find what is actually true, you know, but how do you not use that process of questioning what's true in the wrong moments where you can shut down the whole process? First of all, if I was like, you know, I have to go to work after this, you wouldn't be like, why, right? You'd be like, of course you do. Me too. But if I said I'm sad or I'm mad, you might say why, or we often ask ourselves why when we have certain feelings. And it's this subtle kind of shoulding on ourselves, like we shouldn't feel that way. And it pulls us into thinking.
Right.
For most of us, when we notice, oh, I feel sad today, and we say, well, why am I sad? Now, I'm not saying you never want to reflect on what's causing your emotions, but if you're in a moment where you have time and space to feel sad, the quickest way to shut down the release, the emotional evacuation of sad, is to start thinking about why you're sad. And so there's a whole art form of like, how do you move feelings? How do you know when it's time to move feelings? How do you create a container that will help you move feelings? How do you test your feelings after you've let them out? And how do you recover? And those two wings of like parts integration work, emotional release work, I think are the absolute most essential for people to actually get to a place where number one, they feel whole because they're not hiding these secret parts of them in their emotional basement closet. So they actually feel authentic. And then number two, they're not carrying around decades of unprocessed pain. So they're really in the present of their resourced adult. And the best part is they have the emotional skills, what I call emotional resilience. I call it the new happy. I think it's better than happy. If you have it, you're going to be really happy a lot of the time because to be emotionally resilient means you've healed quite a bit. But it's like, it's the knowing that you can handle life. You can handle the ups and downs because you can have your feelings, which means that you can take risks, you can fall in love, you can go for a new job, you can put a book out and not have to fear that failure or rejection will annihilate you because you know that those are just emotions that you can move through like a good poop.
No. What did you call it? EPT? Is that what
Yep,
you?
emotional body training for
That's right.
grown-ups.
That's right.
I wanted that to be the title of the book, but the ladies of the publishing industry, I usually say the old white ladies, but they're probably sick of me calling them that in interviews, but they were like, honey, we don't talk about poop. And remember how I said the depth, the pain? I was like, wow, someone branding wise should have got to me sooner. I'm selling people their pain, their own pain in the metaphor of their own poop. Like,
Yeah.
whoops, you know, like interesting.
You did say you were bringing levity into this, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. We're talking about something that's So important. And you've touched on so many things from conditioning to being able to even identify your emotions, not get caught up in the cognitive, moving in through the motion. We could have hours of
Sure.
discussion here. Yet we're taking it back to theory as well. And there's so much, like you said, dovetailing. We could go back to Freud, Adler, Gestalt, you name it. I'm an Adlerian by trade.
Oh, cool. So you know about the four words. That's where that came from.
I do. I know about them. I'm an Adlerian and I also do the REBT with Ellis. So I've got that kind of dichotomy too.
Nice.
You've got to know your stuff so that you can actually work with people to understand where they may be coming from. But I
Yeah.
love your approach, right? Your practical approach, your theoretical approach, the levity that you bring into it. And obviously, it's tapped into something from an early age where you've been able to evolve with that. And
Yeah.
then also take that information and put it into your TEDx and put it into your book and feed it to community
Yeah.
so that it can be of support to others. This is what this podcast is all about. We have guests on here like yourself where we talk about that evolution, what you're doing to bring support to our community. And you've done so much, Rachel. I love your approach, your book. I can't wait to watch your TEDx and learn more about you. So, as we come to the close of the interview, because like I said, we could go hours, but if you were to lead the listeners who may be feeling stuck in their emotional patterns, one practical tool from your book they can start applying today to create a positive shift, what would that tip be?
I want to acknowledge all the ways everyone's trying to feel better, whether it's yoga or mindfulness or eating well or exercise or therapy. It's like we're trying to feel better. And if you're trying to feel better, that's great. And I really believe and have experienced consistently that the fastest way to feel better is to learn how to feel as bad as you already feel. Like the skill of learning to feel as bad as you feel is actually the shortest, most effective way to feel better. And it might be confusing, seem counterintuitive, but when that actually lands in your system, oh, I just have to let myself feel the bad feelings I'm having in a skillful way and recover from it. There is such liberation. The thing you're hiding from becomes your salvation, just allowing yourself to be as you are, learning how to do that and how to not dwell in it, how to do that in a way that actually transforms your system so that you're lighter, so that you're more yourself. There's such a relief. You don't have to run from yourself. There's nowhere to get to, like there's no out there. And so learn how to feel as bad as you feel. And I promise you, you will feel better.
It's like going potty and that release.
Exactly. It's exactly like that. And that one emotional poo at a time, you lighten your load and become who you really are.
Thank you, Rachel, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
My pleasure.
You can follow Rachel Kaplan on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and at thefeelingsmovement.com. You can also find all of these direct links in the caption, and you can find her incredible book on Amazon.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.